There was this compliment that I got, "Oh, you're pretty for a Jew."
There are a lot more anti-Semitic incidents than you might think.
That's Anna, cancer researcher in Munich, and Doron, judge in Berlin. What most people only see when it hits the headlines, they've experienced in everyday life. Discrimination because they're Jews.
It's real, and it never went away.
It can be subtle, it can be in your face. Sometimes anti-Semitism can be hard to recognize, even in yourself. But no, don't run away.
You don't necessarily have to have a malicious intention to say something anti-Semitic. I'd describe myself as a liberal Jew.
Here we have a tradition-oriented community. There was one bad incident where someone drove by the synagogue on a motorbike and shouted Heil Hitler. This was during drop-off time for the kids at daycare, when a lot of parents bring their children.
And then at a party someone said to me, "Did Hitler forget one or something?"
Adolf Hitler was the dictator of Nazi Germany, responsible for the systematic murder of 6 million Jews.
As a Jew, what do you do in a situation like that? I was pretty stunned.
I was interviewed. It was supposed to be for a feature in a major German magazine. Afterward, we had a coffee and we were sitting together, and then out of nowhere came the question. But come on, let's be honest, with Jews, it's always about the money, right? And you just think, wait a minute, did I hear that right?
And that's just one trope that's been doing the rounds for centuries. In fact, anti-Semitic tropes are nothing new. They've been passed down and reappear in every era, repackaged and seemingly shiny and new for the next generation.
Anti-Semitism comes in many different forms.
Miriam Wenzel, director of Frankfurt Jewish Museum, Germany. So let's look at that example about wealth and money.
Historically, Jews were excluded from many professions in Europe. And among the jobs they were allowed to do was traditionally dealing with coins or exchanging money. That was the case in the early modern period, and this led to the idea that Jews have something to do with money.
Times of crisis provide particularly fertile ground for spreading anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies. An age-old and murky myth, the hidden hand.
You can't see it, it's not there, but there is an assumption that there is something sinister.
Ari Dubnov, history professor, George Washington University.
We saw it even in cases like the COVID pandemic, right? These questions of who exactly benefits from the COVID, and then implying that actually it's a conspiracy of Jewish, businessmen and companies that are producing the vaccines and so on.
It's a convenient idea that there's a small group of people secretly controlling the world. In reality, it's an ungrounded conspiracy theory that's really old.
That, of course, is absolutely the core anti-Semitic narrative, and it's a Christian one.
This hidden hand is a baseless anti-Semitic trope dating back as far as the Middle Ages, when Christianity strove to become the dominant religion in Europe and began to persecute Jews.
And that means that the conspiracy theory that Jews are doing something in secret is always part of the mobilization of feelings, which in turn leads to acts of violence.
I often wonder, what do Germans actually say over family Christmas dinner, for example, if anti-Semitic conspiracy theories come up at the table? Do you stay silent or do you speak up?
You should say something, because ignoring anti-Semitism won't make it magically go away. Let's stay in Germany for a while. So why does it seem like it's so difficult for a lot of Germans to confront anti-Semitism today? Maybe because they see it as something gone and overcome?
I think a lot of people associate anti-Semitism only with World War II, that Hitler created anti-Semitism and it was all over in 1945, and that's just completely ahistorical.
So that's another thing. Anti-Semitism isn't just a Nazi thing. But although Jews were long subjected to violence, expulsions, forced conversions, and systematic persecution, the Nazi era was undoubtedly without parallel. Starting in 1933, the Nazis used anti-Semitic legislation and propaganda to create a culture of segregation and hostility. All over Nazi-occupied Europe, Jews were eventually detained in ghettos and deported to concentration or death camps, where they were subjected to forced labour, atrocities, and mass murder. By the time Nazi Germany surrendered, 6 million Jews had been murdered.
The minute we automatically think that the step next after anti-Semitism is already Holocaust, we find it problematic to identify the more sinister, the more mundane, the discriminatory practices, the tropes, the trafficking of stereotypes that is not automatically tomorrow is leading, God forbid, for a complete nihilism and the genocidal practices.
So you're an anti-Semite only if you say Jews should go to the gas chambers? Anything else is legitimate criticism?
So don't be mistaken. The bar for anti-Semitism isn't set at murder. It can also sound like this.
You look pretty for a Jew.
But what does that do to a person?
You notice it when my grandmother gives me matzah crackers on Passover and I put them in the car and she says, "No, never leave them lying around, hide them. I don't want my neighbor to see that we're Jewish." There are a lot of Jews in my circle of friends who aren't open about being Jewish because they've had bad experiences with anti-Semitism. It's just stressful for me to pretend 24/7, so I'm open about being Jewish. If someone has a problem with that, they should just come and sort it out with me.
I think there are many different reactions because it's quite distinct, even in the same person. There's the feeling of, I'll get my suitcase out, I have to be better prepared for what's happening. Can I really permanently belong to society here? Am I sufficiently protected? Where do I move to?
For some Jews, that one place they can feel safe is Israel, the world's only Jewish state. Since 1950, Jews from all over the world and Gentile converts to Judaism are entitled to settle in Israel and receive full Israeli citizenship if they want to.
For me as a practicing Jew, it's meaningful when I can celebrate Jewish holidays there.
And it's a safe haven. There's also the feeling that there's a country, that there's a place to simply be, and to maybe not have the feeling of being in a minority.
That's historically been of great importance to Jews, but walking down the street wearing my Star of David and knowing that nothing will happen is an incredible feeling as a Jew.
But the decades since the founding of the State of Israel have seen a new facet of anti-Semitism emerge: Israel-related anti-Semitism. More often than not, political events linked to Israel also prompt a rise in anti-Semitic attacks, way beyond Israel's borders, especially when there's a flare-up in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
As soon as there's conflict in Israel, the atmosphere here immediately becomes tougher, more uncomfortable.
So what's always a bit irritating for me is when I say I'm Jewish and then people criticize me for Israel's policies or blame me for them. I don't have an Israeli passport, I can't vote there, I don't have the right to vote there. I don't have a say in the political situation and I'm not Israeli.
In fact, the vast majority of Jews around the world are not Israeli, and many have no connection with the country.
When someone asks me, what do you think about what's going on in Israel right now, and without an accusatory undertone, and without, what are you and your people doing there again, but simply, what do you make of it? Then of course I answer them normally. But it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
So, Jews all over the world are not responsible for Israeli policy. Of course, the Israeli government can be criticised, but where do you draw the line between anti-Semitism and political debate?
I would draw the line in several cases. Demonstrating not in front of the Israeli embassy, but in front of a synagogue, that's already starting to blur the line.
Da haben Sie schon gleich eine der zentralen Probleme.
There you already see one of the central problems. In criticism of the Israeli government's policy, there's very often the connotation of questioning the right to exist.
Fragestellung des Existenzrechts. Gemeint ist und mitschwingt.
Forcing Jews to, whether we talk about Israel or not, automatically when they enter into the room, state your position regarding Israel. Are you pro or against? You have to state it very clearly up front. This is also, if not borderline anti-Semitism, it's upfront anti-Semitism. It automatically assumes that the every Jew, per definition by them being Jewish, are, in a way, agents of the Israeli government, and so on and so forth.
So how to handle this political hot potato? Not talk about it at all?
That's why I'm a bit cautious about this idea that you mustn't talk about Israel at all. Of course, Israel is close to us, and of course, it means more to us than many other countries. But yes, you can just talk about it normally.
So, criticising Israeli policy, fine. Conflating Israeli state policy and Jewish life, not fine, and often anti-Semitic. Today, anti-Semitism is even easier to spread, thanks to social media. Which means you should be extra cautious when it comes to where you're getting your information.
Like reading the fine print on any food that we put into our body, we need to be careful. The fact that it's simply out there and people are retweeting it or sharing it on Facebook doesn't guarantee anything in terms of its validity, often, unfortunately, the opposite.
So with that in mind, don't believe everything you read. The world over, Jews experience anti-Semitism, no matter when or where. And ultimately, it boils down to the same tropes, the same prejudices, the same hatred. Battling it is arduous. And yet, there's so much more to being Jewish than fighting this hatred.
That's perhaps something I'd wish for, continuing to take a look at active Jewish life and showing what's actually happening. Because there's always a great danger, on the Jewish side too, that you only think within these dimensions of anti-Semitism, and you actually forget the positive sides a bit.
I can't identify with that victim role at all. I always wear my Star of David openly. I walk through the streets of Munich as a proud Jewish woman.